Nigel, it's good to see you. We were chatting with my co-founder a couple weeks ago, and we determined that we've known each other well over a decade now. And I just got to say, for the audience, you are the first person that I heard speak to the, I would say maybe the modern sales motion and all the associated technology as Sales 2.0. In fact, your blog is Sales 2.0. And I remember just being a fan of sales tech, CRM, but the sales motion and how we can improve it. I came across your work, and again, we've been friends well over a decade. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Roy.
Well, I know that this is somewhat of a special episode in that you've put together an ebook that we're going to be partnering on called Make Sales Easier. And there are a couple kind of key themes to the book. So for the folks out there, keep an eye out for the ebook that we're going to be putting out. And then, we're also going to be speaking to a couple best practices and ways that you could actually promote an ebook as a salesperson. So marketing creates all this great content, but it's all for one to many. And so we'll also speak to how you can leverage an ebook type content within your one-to-one initiatives. But real quick, I know the ebook, Nigel, covers a couple different things, but one of the core kind of pieces is how to actually get meetings at bigger, larger organizations at a higher rate than cold calling. And I know specifically your research has shown that your approach yields an 8 times more often meeting or conversion rate than traditional sort of the older school cold calling technique. So I think I love that just for a couple of reasons. Of course, we love to move up market, and eventually companies generally will move up market. But I think you're focused on that human component and that relationship selling. So I'm really excited about that piece. But for today, I know we're going to dive into 3 kind of main points today. How would you sort of approach getting into the door in this age of AI?
Yeah, that's right. And thanks, for being very kind with explaining how old I am. So that's it's a really nice way to do it. But we've got
Did I do it
visual.
right? Okay, good.
Yeah, I mean, just a bit of backstory. Like I'm an engineer by training, and then I went on and did an MBA, and I kind of I think like quite a lot of people, I got into sales by accident. And I got into sales, and I was trying to learn how to do it right. And I got into this prospecting part of it, and I was speaking to my colleagues, how do I do this thing? And it was basically like somebody told me, here's a list, start calling the person with a name that starts with A, and in America go to Z. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm a former chip designer with a fancy MBA. This is my process. And that's I think where originally maybe we met each other. And the results of that, just doing what I think of as a sort of volume cold calling, are just like made no sense to me as an engineer. It was like 1 in 100 if you're lucky. And I always compared it to the microchip world where nobody builds chips where 1 chip and 100 work. That just isn't a business. That doesn't get you go broke quickly. So I started looking into all this stuff, and we've got to the AI age, and I was there when we first met. I was in the first stage of Sales 2.0. Maybe it's 2.1 now. Some people like to say 3.0, but there were all these tools just starting to come out when we first talked about this. And those have helped, but they also had a side effect that I had no idea about at the time, which is they made a lot of salespeople into glorified mini email marketers. And, that is not now paying off. Now we're going to a new place, because what happens is when something like that catches on and everybody's doing it, buyers are just getting inundated with these emails, and a lot of them are really, honestly, as you know, and we all know, kind of spam.
Spam.
You
Yep.
know? Yeah, I mean, they're not
Professional
well
spammers.
researched, right? And you've turned a bunch of salespeople into spammers now, which is this was not the intention, nor is that a great result. So what's happened now is that some of these results of cold calling and cold emailing have dropped already. And AI is only just starting, generative AI, it's so new, right? It's only just starting to have an impact. But you're already seeing some of the smart people, like, a gentleman who was just on your show, Adam Robinson, just mentioned this on LinkedIn. Jason Bay, who I love, who is actually a cold calling coach, and probably I think he puts out some of the best stuff on cold calling. These guys are coming out in the last few months and saying, we have a problem. This stuff is, it never worked that well, if you like, 1 in 100, but it's even getting worse. And AI is only just starting. And a lot of people are thinking the solution to 1 in 100, soon becoming 1 in 200, and so on, is just to do more. So we'll do more of what doesn't work well, right? And that, I just call that brute force, and I don't think brute force is going to be the answer for everyone, particularly, as you mentioned, when you're upscale, selling bigger ticket items. I don't think brute force is the way to go. I think being more intelligent about it is the way to go, or at least the way to start.
And Nigel, quick question. Wasn't this always the case? Wasn't it always that you had these tier one top producers who just had these incredible skills that allowed them to stand out from the crowd, and then there were kind of the rest of the sales folks who were kind of barely getting by or not. And now technology, especially this kind of last wave of it, you called it, maybe, I know you called it the 2.0 movement, but maybe some folks were calling it something else. In any case, wasn't this just about amplifying what was already there and allowing you to do more of the crappiness if you were not a skilled salesperson, more at scale? So in this case, spamming people, not preparing, all those things, but being able to show more people that you didn't have a clue.
Yeah, I
And
think so. I mean, to an extent, I think we just armed people with these email type tools in particular. And one thing as humans, it's much easier to hide behind email than a phone call. So we just empowered so many people to be spammers and to just put out that low quality stuff, right, at scale. And I think it worked for a while because scale, is a great masking lever for quality, right? There's quantity and there's quality, and we just went for quantity, and we, for a while that worked. But now AI is coming. I think we have to look at that equation again, because I think that it's not going to be enough. Where do we go? 10,000 emails, 100,000 emails, 1,000,000 emails. Buyers have AI as well. We tend to forget about the buyer, right? We think we're thinking about the buyer, but we forget. So the buyers, when they're getting 1,000,000 emails, they're going to be cranking up those email spam filters, and they're going to see, very, very, very few of these things. And the low quality ones, they don't want to see them anyway. Why should they?
Well, I would argue that just within the organizations that I've worked at, those low quality, low effort, low skill, low passion, right? Because I think that's a thing that we don't talk enough about in particularly B2B technology sales and things like that. We talk about sales motion and process and automation and all that, but passion and excitement and giving a shit, right? Like, you talk about in the second part of the ebook, the human connections and being able to leverage that. And to your point, the consciousness or the thinking of like, oh, human connections and doing that in a very qualitative way is not scalable. But in fact, it is a vital component to getting big deals and to just excelling at scale.
Yeah, and I think, scale's an interesting. You mentioned that word. I want to just make a point here. So, when a lot of times people talk about referrals, and I was trained this way at the beginning too. You think about a very narrow definition. You think about referrals from your past customers. And okay, I've worked in some small company environments, some growth companies, where you don't have that many customers to start with, right? And you're one of a few sales guys, salespeople, and you're thinking, well, I'll be able to get 4, or 3 referrals, right? But there's this guy, and I don't know if everybody knows about this. There's a professor in England called Robin Dunbar, and he did this human research, not to do with sales, but it applies. And he found out that as humans, on average, we have and can maintain about 150 relationships, right? And I'm not talking just about your clients now. I'm talking about, your family, your friends, your hairdresser, not for me, but for you, Jorge. These are humans, right? And it turns out that those humans also know 150 people. So what people don't process, and I want to bring to the fore about scale, is that if you know 150 people and each of those 150 people know 150 people, the math on that, what LinkedIn, and you see the little symbol, calls second degree connections, right, is 22,500 people, right? That's 150 times 150, right? So if we're thinking about referrals as just humans, right, 150 people I know, they like me. These are the 150 who like me, right? The 150 who like you, and they have their 150, right? The opportunity, the potential for getting referrals is not 4. It's all those people. It could be 22,000 people. So what I want to do is just shine a light on that and say, especially if you're, it actually has a sort of interesting characteristic, which is if you're trying to sell to bigger companies, it actually works in your favor, because these bigger companies, think of them as sort of blobs of people. There's that much more chance that you're going to find somebody in a Goldman Sachs or a JP Morgan Chase than you're going to find in Joe Schmo startup. So when you're going after those big deals, which generally correlate, by the way, to the big accounts, you want to think about those 22,500 people, because if you get a conversation with anyone, you're better off than no one. So when you're selling big whales, think about getting those referrals. Don't think you've got 4 clients who you can refer you, but think about the 22,000 people in your actual life you can get to.
And I would add to that, in my experience, using a referral model, the conversion rates are way higher
Way higher.
for
So
referrals.
yeah, exactly. I mean, my research, in cold calling, numbers vary, but let's say we get 1 in 100 by the time we get somebody on the phone, or we get an email through a spam filter, it's like 1 in 1,000. In this case, if you get a referral, from my research, my experience, my data, it's usually 50 to 75% it works. Let's call it 50, right? So we're talking about a 50% success rate versus a 1%. Let's say, easy math. That's
Interesting.
50 times.
Yeah,
It's not hard math to figure that's better.
and it's also rethinking the way that we approach our strategies, right? Because I think, to your point, there was an emphasis on scale and numbers and these sort of things. But if you do a fraction of the effort, or the contacting, or let's just call it, the outbounding, I call it approaching.
Yeah, sure.
And if you do a fraction of that versus what you could do through a spam machine, let's say. And again, I'm not going to poo poo on these tools out there. There's a way to do this, right, where you can meet in the middle. But we're just speaking to what we've observed, I would say, over the last, you know, 8 years or so, certainly. Um, Back to my point, if you are able to have a 50 to 75% conversion rate, right, that I think means the world, right? It speaks for itself.
Yeah, I think it's not a hard one, and there is some homework to do, which I talk about in the ebook as well. There's some homework because we're not just going to download a list of 10,000, 100,000 people and just send them all the same message, spam them all. We're not going to do that. We're going to look for these connections, and we're going to have to build ourselves some lists of people who know people we know. We have a
Mm,
common connection, and LinkedIn is part of this, but we know that there's basically some more sales ops type work that has to be done. You
mm,
have to be smarter. You have to build these lists that are well targeted. But I would argue the extra effort, to do that is far smaller than the effort you put in when you have these tiny conversion numbers that you're going to get by generic volume, whether it's cold calling or cold emailing. And
mm.
that stuff also, I don't want to go too deep down here, but that stuff isn't helping your brand, is it?
Yeah,
You know,
certainly. There's a
900,
movement.
bad emails is not helping your brand as a sales professional or a company. It's not helping.
Well, Nigel, I was going to say there is a movement called nearbound or network led growth that you've seen a bunch of folks start to kind of articulate over the last, I'd say, 2 years or so, since I've seen it kind of bubble up. And I think it speaks to a lot of the things you're talking about, right? When we talk about scaling the creation of that list based on proximity and your network and these sort of things, whether it's you as a salesperson or your customer who's now willing to do the referrals and opening up their network around them, or even at the target account level, you've seen a bunch of tools out there that have allowed you as a sales organization to be able to map those connections and then cross sell and things like that. And I think that's what's really encompassed this near bound strategy that folks have been talking about. And of course, the associated technologies.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, this is very similar to Nearbound. I've read the book Nearbound. The one thing, and I haven't, gone in deep with the actual people, but looking forward to doing that at some point. But my overall thinking is that salespeople and their bosses and their bosses' bosses should just not feel constrained. Nearbound, totally agree with it. A lot of it talks about these kind of partnerships with other companies, and I feel it gets a little formal. I totally agree with all that, but people don't have to be constrained by that. As I'm saying, it could be your brother-in-law, your whoever, these humans who like you. It's surprising. We don't know, sitting here today without doing some work, we don't know who other people know. I've had many situations where I'll talk to someone, and we're drinking beer or whatever, and we're not thinking very formally about partnership deals or anything. It suddenly turns out that they know someone I really want to know, someone who could really help my business. So I just don't want people to feel too constrained by a formality of who they can, in quotes, partner with. It could be any human in your life who you have a real relationship with, and they have a real relationship with someone
Mm.
in a sphere where you want to go, right? So it's broader than any formal. It includes that, but I'd like salespeople to just feel, the power they have if they look into that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, folks, again, do your homework. When you dive into this ebook, you're going to be able to see these details and start to be able to act upon them. But also, what are those various other methods or channels that are higher probabilities of, or have higher probabilities of connecting. Uh, Again, the ebook's going to dive into that real quick. When you think about the inspiration behind putting this particular ebook together, anything that really stands out? And I know there's a lot of different points that the ebook covers, and we've spoken to a couple of them here today. But at a high level, what can folks really start to understand or expect to derive from reading this ebook?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to, I think it's potentially the biggest problem in a lot of sales organizations is just getting in the door. That's the beginning of the pipeline. So a lot of companies, they don't have enough at the beginning of the pipe or the funnel, if you like that analogy. And I just want to help salespeople. I want to help owners of small businesses fill that funnel, because I think when you've got that funnel, a lot of the other problems take care of themselves. You can get away with some stuff, but if you don't fill the funnel, everything's a nightmare. You can't deal with those longer sales cycles. You can't deal with anything that's stuck in the cycle. Everything's a problem. Somebody said to me from small business the other day, their problem is long sales cycles, and they're holding their breath on the 3 or 4 deals that they have. If you fill that funnel at the beginning using techniques like this, you don't have to hold your breath. Even if people drop out, you're going to be fine. And I think it builds the confidence of the salesperson, the sales manager, the owner of the business. It's just, my hope that more people will, kill their quota, more businesses will keep the lights on. It's just a couple of things in there that I think people don't talk about enough. There are templates in there. It's not that complicated, but it's a different way of thinking. I think it's a more intelligent way of thinking, and I just want people to have that chance. It's in the ebook, and I'm sure you're going to say it, but I'm always happy to speak to people too. So we're going to make it easy for them to have a chat if anyone wants to talk about it.
Absolutely. Well, Nigel, thank you so much for being on the show. And for the folks out there, go to bit.ly. So that's bit.ly/make sales easier. Check out the ebook, consume it, eat it for breakfast, eat it for lunch, eat it for dinner. Really dig in, because I think you'll find some of these really core concepts that will help you move the needle. And then you can start to think about, okay, well, how do I use technology to be able to amplify this? Again, it is bit.ly, bit.ly/make sales easier. And of course, we're also going to embed your calendar on the page. So shout out to my company, Asset Mule, that's powering this page. So this is converted into a sales asset, and you can go ahead and book some time with Nigel, ask him questions, really dig into these concepts. And if you have not already connected with Nigel, go ahead and connect with him on LinkedIn as well. I know you've been sharing content for a long time. I'm not going to say how long, but a long time there. And so there are great nuggets of wisdom and actionable insights that you can learn. So definitely check it out. Nigel, it's really great to see you. Thank you so much for partnering on this ebook and then just being a friend.
You too, Roy. Always a pleasure, man. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Have a great day.